Okay, so the show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And today, my guest, I'm very excited to have a LaGuardia alum, Ricardo Aca, who is now a senior digital organizer at Make the Road. And he's going to talk to us about the landmark DACA case that was decided by the Supreme Court and which upholds that policy, which began in the Obama administration. Welcome, Ricardo. You want to say hi?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I was
Oh,
like,
thank you. I know you're very busy. Like tomorrow, I know you're involved with the primaries, right?
yeah. So we have an election coming up in New York. Tomorrow is like the June 23rd primaries. I guess we'll talk more about this, but being undocumented, I cannot personally vote. But for me, it's super important to get out the vote and help elect like people who will fight for the respect and dignity for communities like ours, or for Black and Brown communities, and that also includes undocumented folks like myself and my parents. So for me, like the elections are always like super important and super crazy busy. Especially like in Queens, we have a really special election in Queens. So I'm definitely doing a lot of work around that. And thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm getting a kind of an echo, which is one of the reasons why I was saying that, typically we use headsets, but I don't know, maybe my engineer, Chris, will chime in at some point and tell me if everything's all right. Like I mentioned before, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and some of your studies up to now?
Yeah. I graduated from LaGuardia Community College. I guess when I graduated from high school, my being undocumented at the time, I did not have DACA. So my initial thought process was that like maybe I can work in a field where I could potentially make some money from cash, like getting paid in cash, and that my idea of having some sort of profession was perhaps becoming like a wedding photographer or like a quinceañera photographer or like a baby shower photographer, and then you sort of be able to make some sort of income with my degree in commercial photography at LaGuardia. So then when I was graduating high school, I really looked into programs that were like affordable to me, because at the time I also didn't have, there was no access for state financial aid for undocumented immigrants. So a lot of it, my education at LaGuardia Community College was paid out of pocket. It was paid by my parents and by my work sometimes. So, for me, that was like super, super important. And yeah, so that's why I went into photography. I looked at a couple of schools. I saw that like Queens Community College had a program, photography program, but then also LaGuardia, and LaGuardia was just like closer to me. And so I decided to go there, and eventually, I was able to use photography like as a way to have a voice. At first, I think I wanted to work in fashion because in New York City, there's a huge business in fashion. But then eventually, I realized it wasn't really like the career that I wanted. I wanted to focus still like on elevating the stories of my community, of people like me, and then eventually, I was able to do that through photography, and like that's what I like to focus on in doing portraiture that tells the stories, particularly of like immigrant communities.
So yeah, as you said, you studied photography with us, and right about the time you were going to graduate was, I believe, when Trump was elected, right? And you suddenly the photography took a different role. It got very politicized. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, so I graduated in 2012, but then afterwards I was working in the photography program as a photo assistant or as a lab assistant, and I was working there for a couple of years. In 2015, I was working part time at LaGuardia, but then I was also working at a restaurant. And so coincidentally, the restaurant that I was working at was at a Trump Soho location at a Trump hotel. It was a Japanese food restaurant. I had been working there since like 2013. So I had been there working for a few years. And so then I think in 2015, when Trump decided to run for president, I guess during his press conference, like his initial press conferences, he decided to label Mexicans as like rapists, drug dealers, and criminals. And someone who kind of was working in one of his buildings, I took that like offense very personal, because this was not who I was, and this was also not anybody of the people that I work with, particularly in the kitchen. I feel like in the restaurant industry, which is really huge here in New York, we see that a lot of the workers who are like the most essential ones are always in the back of the house, and they don't they don't receive the recognition or the respect that they often deserve. And so for me, I took that offense very personal, because not only he was labeling me as a criminal, he was labeling everyone who I work with, everyone in my family, an entire community. So then I think that's when I decided that, I wanted to do something and I wanted to respond. So, and then my initial way to do that was like, well, what skills do I have to be able to respond to his comments? And I remember during that time, it was like the Gold Cup, and it was happening like the finale, like the final soccer game was happening in New Jersey. I think I went to New Jersey that weekend, and then I saw that there was this Mexican man holding a sign that said like, F Donald Trump, so it said like F Donald Trump. And I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. And it was like pretty bold that there was this Mexican man at a soccer game that was mostly like about like, supporting your home state about, or your home country, about like, having fun with your family. And then he had used this moment to kind of just be able to have like a political stance on what was said by Donald Trump. And I found that like super inspiring. And so then I think I was like, well, I want to be able to do more of that. Like, I want to be able to document more of these stories. And so I think eventually, there was it was the game that I attended was like a semifinal. So then eventually I went to the final game, which was also like Mexico had advanced. And so then I went and I brought like these 3 signs, the one that said like, not a criminal, not a rapist, not a drug dealer. And then I just kind of like was hanging around the parking lot in Philadelphia. And then I asked people, I was like, hey, like, this is what Trump has been saying about our community. I'm trying to work on this project. Would you be willing to participate? And then the response was like incredible. Like, people just really, really wanted to be like photographed, and they really wanted to say something. And that's kind of when I realized we're like, like the Mexican community, or a lot of like immigrant communities, sometimes whether we're like documented or undocumented, even though we don't get to like potentially sometimes like vote or like have a voice in politics, like that doesn't mean that we don't care about what is being said about us on like national media, particularly by Donald Trump at the time. So I think, I started this project, and then eventually I was like, I think this is kind of what has been my calling for probably forever. Like it just like fit. Like, it was just like I was super passionate about like documenting the stories of my community. I had graduated from like a degree in commercial photography. I was like super proud of being able to produce this work. So eventually it just kind of became that like, I wanted to be like a photojournalist. So I want to like document the stories using the degree that I have and the skills that I have. And so that's kind of what I have been doing ever since. But yeah, so for me, that's how it all started in 2015 when he became president. And essentially, I currently still use my photography and my voice to be able to I guess, represent or like stand up for the Mexican community and for immigrant communities who are often like marginalized.
Yeah, my engineer Chris Pope is standing by. We've downloaded the video, and we're going to try something. Hopefully, it can work to stream the video a short 3-minute video that you made about the project. Chris, can you run that?
My name is Ricardo Aca. I am from Puebla, Mexico, and I work in the Trump Soho building.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
I've worked at the Trump Soho for the past 2 years. I'm a busser at the only restaurant in the hotel. This is not what I plan on doing with my life, but I work really hard and I definitely don't take it for granted.
Are you a criminal?
I am not a criminal.
Are you a drug dealer?
Not a drug dealer.
Are you a rapist?
Definitely not a rapist. I'm an undocumented immigrant. I was about 14 when I crossed the border. I came here with my family, my stepfather, my mom, and my sister. We live in Bushwick, Brooklyn. We've lived here for the last 9, almost 10 years. This is where I went to high school. This is where all of my friends are. It's home to me. I feel like Republicans think Mexicans are lazy. But I personally work 3 jobs. My stepfather works 2 jobs. Everything that my family has, and like we have earned it by working. We came to America because we wanted a better life. My mom was able to put me, my sister through college, which I'm not so sure if in Mexico I would have been able to do that. I received my associate's degree in commercial photography. It's something that I've always had an eye for and that I think I'm really good at. I'm very passionate about it. It also gives me a voice. I can't vote, but I can take photos and share the stories of people like me. You know, Trump keeps pointing out all these immigrants that have done all these terrible things. But those aren't the immigrants that I know. That's not what we're like. And photography is a way for me to show that. Other Republicans have criticized Trump's comments, but to me they all seem to have the same position on immigration. I mean, I may have an accent, but I'm not stupid. And I know I could lose my job just for talking about Trump, but it doesn't make me proud to go to work every day under his name. I don't think the rest of America feels the same way that he does. I hope that they don't. I love it here. I love New York City. I feel as much part of this country as anybody else, but I'm also proud to be Mexican.
So great video, very powerful at the time. I was kind of blown away, particularly by the caliber. That it was such a high quality production value. I thought it was well made video.
Yeah.
It,
Get
sorry.
some background
Go ahead.
behind that story. Yeah. Well, some background behind that was that at the time I was dating the filmmaker, so essentially, like, there was nobody else who kind of knew my story better than he did at the time. And so, you know, I don't think it was like, it's not like super easy that you're like, okay, yeah, you can document my whole story and, like, you know, basically tell everyone that I'm undocumented. It's something that I've never done before, but, you know, I think I was dating this person at the time, Chase Whiteside, who's the producer of the video. And so it just kind of made it so much easier, and I felt like more at ease, and I kind of was aware that he wouldn't do a video that, you know, didn't represent me, or that, you know, or where he would just kind of like leave me hanging if something were to happen. So I think that's kind of, it was just like a very like special like mutual collaboration, and I think that's what it all kind of worked perfectly, and then eventually landed in the New York Times, and it led me to where I am today at McDormand here.
And there was also the exhibition that we had at the college, right? Did we also do it? Did we also do it at the downtown location as well, or is that I'm mixing things up at this point?
Sure about that. I know that there was a couple of events, like including like a fundraiser event with LaGuardia.
Right.
Some of the photos were featured, but yeah. So thanks to Javier, right? So he curated.
Javier Arenas, our chief technician at the photo lab in LaGuardia.
Yeah, so he curated my show. You know, I took a lot of pictures. You know, I did a project, you know, with the Mexican community at the soccer game, and then one also at Harvard, where there was a group called Act on a Dream that was led by undocumented students, and it focused on elevating the stories of like dreamers or like DACA recipients. And so then, you know, I was able to have like a show in 2015 at LaGuardia, which was like, it was like my first show, and it was like super like special. And, you know, it has, you know, my work at LaGuardia has opened up a lot of doors for me, you know, being able to have like really good teachers and like professors and people who really taught me like the skills of like being able to use like photography like as a tool to defend yourself, or like to tell the stories of your community.
Yeah, it's a powerful story. So you talked about it before, and you know, but how this whole thing triggered a career now where you've kind of moved into the political realm. So you want to talk a little bit about Make the Road and working your way into that that world?
Yes. So yeah, so after the video came out, you know, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do with this platform that I have been given? You know, I had been featured like New York Times, the LA Times, Univision, Telemundo, and I was like, either I could just kind of like stop here, or I can like keep going. And so for me, it was like, I was like, okay, this man, if he becomes president, I know it's gonna be like a long fight. But essentially, like the goal for me was there that he did not become a president, because this was still in 2015. So then I was like looking for ways to get involved, and then I came across this young organizer who's also a LaGuardia graduate. His name is Antonio Alarcon. He was one of the plaintiffs in the DACA case that was heard at the Supreme Court this past week, or like that was decided this past week. So Antonio Alarcon also graduated from LaGuardia, same as Martin, who is like the lead plaintiff in the DACA case. So I was able to, I met with him. I think I reached out to him via Facebook, and I was like, hey, I saw that you're like, you know, very active, that you're always doing these rallies outside of like Donald Trump. I was like, how can I get involved? Can I like join you at one of these rallies? And he was like, yeah. It was like coincidentally, it was like around like September 15 of 2015, which was like the Mexican Independence Day. And he was like, yeah, we're doing a rally like tonight, like outside of like the Trump Hotel, Trump International in Columbus Circle. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And so then I kind of just met up with him. And then I just found like this big community of like people rallying, protesting outside of Trump, kind of just, standing up for the respect and dignity of immigrant and working class communities. And I was like, it just felt like this instant connection to want to be part of that movement and be part of that fight. And at first, just sort of became a member of the organization. They have this program called the Youth Power Project, which focuses on organizing efforts so that like immigrant youth are able to attend college or like advocate for the rights of immigrant communities, but they also kind of like help them, like, let's say, apply for FAFSA. If you're eligible for FAFSA or for state financial aid, they help students apply for financial aid. But if you're undocumented, they help you find like resources or like scholarships for undocumented students so that you're able to go to school. So I was kind of part of like that youth program, even though I was at the time, I was already like 24, about to turn 25. And then 2 years later, I was like a very active member. I was going to every rally. I learned how to like, go to Albany, which is kind of where, all our elected officials are. We have like the state assembly, the New York State Senate, that's where like Governor Cuomo is at. So I kind of learned all of the like in and outs of like how to advocate for like policy, like transformative policy. And so, and that was like through Make the Road New York. And then eventually in 2017, I was offered like an internship as a digital organizer. So the digital organizer focuses on basically elevating a lot of the campaigns that we advocate for more on the digital side. And that means, creating like social media content, like pushing like social media campaigns, like updating website, just a lot of like digital material, like video producing, like photo content. So anything related to like digital and being able to use those tools to advance like policy and like advocate for our campaigns, that's just sort of kind of what I started doing first as an intern. And I guess, they were really happy with my work. And then they hired me like full time in 2018. And I have been working there first as a digital organizer and recently got promoted to senior digital organizer.
So, yeah, and it's interesting how these things, by the way, Antonio also spoke at our virtual commencement. He was one of the speakers. And then, of course, fortuitously, the decision came down as well this week. So it's been kind of like one thing on top of the other, which was one of the reasons, I wanted you on this show back when you first started working with them, because I was interested in your story and the progress you were making. Obviously this is a previous incarnation of the show. I don't even know what I was calling it back then. It's On, or how it worked, whatever the name of the show was at the time, because I can't believe it's been 4 years since this happened. And I think it's also exciting the fact that the things you learned here with us, you have now applied in this world. But I also noticed you're at Baruch now as well. Are you studying? Have you gone on?
Well, I went to Baruch to study public and international affairs. I was like, okay, I want to learn about like policy. I want to learn about politics and just kind of like get my hands dirty into this world. I have not graduated, so I think this happened around a time where I was offered like a full-time job at Make the Road New York, and it was kind of like, honestly, it was like a little bit challenging for me to balance like a full-time job and being a full-time student. And this was kind of like the last year of like Baruch, where you're like kind of have all those like 4 classes, and it was a lot. And then I think at the time I was also still working at the restaurant, so I was kind of like juggling the restaurant, the job at Make the Road New York, and Baruch. So eventually, I think I just decided to, essentially my dream is to really work full time for Make the Road New York and kind of have a career here. So I kind of like put my educational hold for a bit. But I was working on my bachelor's in public and international affairs, which I'm hoping to still get at some point. But yeah, it was kind of like, it was challenging at the time because I was basically being offered a lot of opportunities that essentially I was like, I didn't even know how to like manage all of them. But like getting a job at Make the Road was like a big priority, and like I'm really happy here. Right, I'm essentially I have like this job of my dreams in so many ways. So.
I know, yeah, it's fabulous that way. We're still not at the halfway point, but I wanted to start talking about the DACA case and getting it's fabulous that we've got you here because you have the insider's view particularly from the plaintiff's point of view. So can you tell us a little bit about the DACA case? Start, from as when you from as a result of getting involved with Make the Road, how it all started happening.
Yeah. So I guess, when Trump ran for president, one of his promises was that like he was gonna basically undo all of the policies that President Barack Obama had advanced, and that included like DACA. So then in 2017, Trump decides that just like, he was like, okay, I'm gonna end DACA and like I'm gonna rescind it. That's it. It's gonna end. And so then, he was able to do that. He has, I guess, I don't know, like he didn't necessarily have like the executive order to do that, but he, as a president, he was like, okay, I'm gonna like end the program right here, just the same way that Barack Obama decided to implement it. So then,
presidential order, right?
Yeah, so it was essentially like blocked for like a temporary short period until eventually you're able to sue the Trump administration, because there was like, and that's where kind of Martin Bartaya like stepped in and kind of like he decided to sue the Trump administration to say like, okay, what you did was wrong because, Barack Obama essentially had the authority to be able to grant us this program, and then you're just kind of deciding to take it away. So then they just decided to sue him, and alongside like many other like plaintiffs across the country, including Antonio, who was one of the plaintiffs. They decided to sue the Trump administration over their decision to end DACA, and then it was debated and like for a couple of years, like in the lower courts, here like at the New York State level, and then eventually it got us to like the highest court in the United States, which is the Supreme Court, and then it was debated back in November 12th. And then before that, we had like a rally where I marched from New York City to Washington, D.C. It was part of like this coalition called the Homies Here, which is form of like a lot of like national organizations that were fighting to defend the DACA program. And that meant like a lot of organizing work, digital organizing, including also like the legal team who was kind of like preparing for this big court case at the Supreme Court, including, the lawyer that was set to represent us, which his name I believe is like Ted Olson. And so, eventually led us there. It was usually the cases they are like debated like on like in November. It was debated in November 12th. But usually the decision doesn't really come only between January and June, because I think somebody needs to draft the whole decision and sort of like kind of do all the paperwork.
Yeah, the clerks that work for them, you typically are the ones that write it on behalf of whoever the majority judge is chosen to write it.
Yeah, correct. So then we were basically on the lookout between January and June, but we were told that, usually like the most controversial cases get saved till the end, which isn't really good news for us, because you're like, we just kind of, sometimes you're like, you just want to know the decision now instead of having to wait like week by week, which was kind of sort of what was happening more towards the later time of the year. We were like on the lookout, like on decisions will usually come like on Mondays or Thursday. So we're kind of like always on the lookout with like the anxiety of not knowing whether it was going to be like a negative decision or a positive decision. But we were also like, based on everything that has been happening, we were like expecting like a negative decision, to be honest. But yeah, so what happened was like, there was a group of like young DACA recipients who decided to sue the Trump administration over its decision to end DACA. And then, we were able to win in the lower courts here in like California, in like New York State, who were basically judges who were saying on outside, they were like, Trump, did not do it the right way, or like he did not end the program the right way. And I think right now, what the Supreme Court is saying is like, Trump basically did not have the, maybe he did have the authority to end the program, but he didn't go about it correctly, or like he didn't do it right. So essentially we won because he
procedurally.
Procedurally, he did not follow the proper procedures. Where basically, I think it's just more like one day he just woke up and he was like, okay, I'm going to end the program right here, without really following instructions of like, there has to be like some sort of protocols. And I think essentially that's just sort of kind of the short story of how we went.
Yeah, we got a long show though, so we're going to go a little deeper into it. But it's a half hour mark, so let's just take a minute for that. You're watching What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. My guest today is Ricardo Aca, who is actually a LaGuardia alumni. He is also the senior digital organizer at Make the Road, and is talking to us about this landmark DACA case decision that came down from the Supreme Court, which he participated in and very closely. When I can't remember when I was looking up or something, and I saw and I mentioned this thing about walking to Washington. I mean, did you literally do this? Did you physically have to walk the whole way, or how did that work? I mean, I don't even know how you organize something like that, but
Yeah, I mean, so that's where we like come in. So yeah, so Make the Road New York and along other organizations, they do a lot of like underground organizing, right? And so that's kind of when we decide to like take the streets. Like a lot of the times when we rally, like it's like a lot of it is planned. It's like it's not like we just decided to like get together and like just take the streets. Usually a lot of it there has to be like some sort of plan. There has to be like marshaling people that are keeping our community safe. So a lot of the organizing that we do is mostly like in a way that is impactful, but that it also protects our communities. And on the ground, we also always make sure to have like a legal team, like a legal observer, in case we were to encounter any sort of issues with the police. That way, we don't have to get in touch with the police. It is the legal observers who contact the police. They are like talk to the police. Then there's people who kind of just make sure that you're like staying within the within the side block or the sidewalk, if you're on the sidewalk, or if you have permission to take the street, like kind of how you're like doing that. So there's like a lot of people who have like are organizers and who kind of learn how to put together a plan to be able to do this really powerful actions that we often see like on the news. So then we knew that this Supreme Court case was coming. We know that it was going to be debated on November 12th, and we're like, okay, so how do we build some momentum around there to kind of be able to like show our stories and show why it is important for our communities to win and for like DACA recipients to win. And so that's when like the Home is Here coalition kind of came up, which was like a group of national organizations, which included United We Dream, Shirla, which they're in California, Make the Road New York, NILC, which are like a group of like lawyers. So for the DACA march particularly, it was part of this group called NACASEC. They're like a group of Korean Americans, and they're like based in Chicago and Virginia. And so then, they have planned organizations in the past where they actually like they rode their bikes from coast to coast. One of their main campaigns is demanding citizenship for all, which we're also kind of calling for citizenship for all, because essentially DACA is only like a temporary program. It doesn't have like a pathway to citizenship, and it also does not benefit many of our parents. Like my parents are, still undocumented. They do not have the same sort of reliefs. So they have been pushing for this campaign for like a really long time, called the Citizenship for All campaign. And so they usually do this really beautiful, impactful actions where they go from one coast to another coast, like from one state to another state. They did one that it was like a biking. I don't remember. I think from from one state to Florida. And then so they went like biking for it was like for an entire month. And I think the point was to kind of just send a message of like, we deserve citizenship for all. And we're kind of out here, like, I guess what you will say, like putting your bodies on the line, like traveling across the country, living in this really extremely hot weather conditions, or really cold, or like walking in the rain. So it's kind of a lot about like showing the humanity of like, you are like, I'm no different than any other person. Like I'm no different than any other like U.S. citizen, And so we decided that, they wanted to partner with Make the Road New York. So they partnered with Make the Road. The NACASEC group met with Make the Road New York, and then they decided that we're going to do like an 18-day and 230-mile walk from New York City to Washington D.C. to the steps of the Supreme Court. And so then, there was a lot of planning around that. They there was like recruiting. We like contacted like members of our community who wanted to be part, like DACA recipients who wanted to march, and eventually, like people sign up. I sign up. I was like, I really wanna do this. I wanna be able to take part in this. And so then eventually we did like a big rally at Battery Park, which is very close to the Statue of Liberty here in New York City. And that was kind of like our starting point, and then our end point was going to be the Supreme Court. But in between, we're going to make stops. So we like stayed like at multiple rest stops. So we stayed at like many like churches. So many churches like opened up their doors for us, and then they let us kind of like stay there for the night. And people kind of knew that we were doing and organizing this 18-day march. So people were offering like support. They like for us to stay, at their homes or take showers at their homes. They would bring us like food and like snacks. So, part of this was just sort of for us to be able to build momentum around the case. And also it's kind of like a digital and like an organizing sort of like strategy of how you change the narrative about immigration and why it's important for us to keep the program in place and like to fight for citizenship for all. Because a part of this march was like not only to defend DACA, but it was also to defend TPS, who was kind of like fighting. It was being fighted in the courts at the time. Also to fight for like citizenship for all, and to abolish ICE, which currently still like is targeting like immigrant communities and detaining like children in immigration centers. So it was kind of like part of like a larger campaign. But yeah, we were able to march from here to there, and then we also launched. like a digital campaign where we release, I believe, about like 15 videos that cover the entire rally. And so if you're able to visit like Make the Roads page, you're able to find like all these 15 videos with the stories of many of the marchers, some of them who were like queer. There was like, there was somebody who brought their partner, and then they were like a DACA recipient, and the partner was not. They were like a U.S. citizen, and so then they were able to tag along. They shared the story like me, who works in like communications, and then there was also like we met the organizer from Chirla, which is an organization in California, who also basically has like the same role that I have here in New York, but he kind of did it and he does it in California, and we were able to meet up, and we're basically like in charge of like the social media, the video producing, like the storyline, and so it was kind of really like a beautiful way of like telling stories. And we also shared the stories of like moms. There was like a couple. There was like two moms, one from California and one from New York, who I get very much on talk about this, who were their children. Their children were like DACA recipients, and so their moms were like, "Okay, I'm gonna travel this entire 18-day journey for my child." So this kind of, I guess, what we're trying to do when we like trying to like organize, whether it's like digital or like underground, is for us to be able to tell these stories about how we're no different than anybody else and how we just deserve the same sort of like respect and dignity, and like that means like a pathway to citizenship for every undocumented person who lives in the U.S. So that was very inspiring for me. Like for me as like a digital organizer, as somebody who like uses photo and video to tell the stories, for me those are the stories that I want to focus on telling. And so there was a couple of moms whose children were DACA recipients who were traveling. There was somebody who was just undocumented and did not, like, they were really young, and then they did not qualify for DACA because it was currently like, it did not accept new applicants. So currently, like, even though we were fighting in the Supreme Court, many of us, like me, who have DACA, we were able to renew our programs because it was we were part of this lawsuit, but the program was not open for any new sort of folks, right? So, and then basically right now with the current victory that we just won, technically the program is back in place as how it was implemented in 2012, and that just means that like anyone who is eligible under those requirements in 2012, then they're able to apply now. So for example, not only am I able to renew my DACA, but any new people who want to apply and are eligible, they're able to apply for DACA, which is, I think, is like the most exciting part about this. It's about like opening this program for like a new wave of undocumented immigrants who are able to benefit from these opportunities. Which for me, just having DACA, it allowed for me to be able to have even more opportunities. Like if I didn't have DACA, I wouldn't have been able to work in the photo program at LaGuardia Community College, right? And it wouldn't have led me to kind of where I am today. So this program, even though right now it's currently like a very temporary program and does not have like a pathway to citizenship, and essentially we need a more permanent solution, as it is, it opened up a lot of doors for me. So, I think that's kind of also why I'm like super involved, because I want to focus on like how we're able to fight for even more immigrant youth to be included in this program, but also for essentially have some sort of immigration reform for the entire 11 million of undocumented immigrants in this country.
That's wow. That sounds like an amazing activity to be involved with. It reminded me, and I was listening to it, reminded me a lot of the civil rights movement of the 60s. And I was thinking about you as a photographer. Did you get to document it? Which you've obviously, you're documenting it in the tools of the new century, right? The new 21st century tools, which is exciting as well. I remember when DACA first came down the pike, there was a lot of fear on the part of people to actually become a part of it. Because they were worried about submitting all of this information about themselves in a program that, for example, a new president comes in and would try to reverse, and then all of a sudden they have your information and you're not getting all the benefits. Is there fear in the community among people who are not part of DACA yet, who could be, or are people seeing this as an opportunity, again, like a door is open and a lot of folks are trying to rush in?
Yeah, I mean, I think even for right now, we're, right after like we won, Trump tweeted that, that he was really obvious that he was upset that this did not side with him. They were like,
he had a bad week, huh?
Like, does the Supreme Court not like me? He was like, does the Supreme Court not like me? That was his tweet. And so, he was really like upset, and we definitely are careful because we know that he will essentially try to find a way to kind of undo this program all over again. But then we also have elections this year, and that's why I want to, I put in a lot of work in making sure that folks are going out and voting. But yeah, so I think back then there was a lot of fear, but I think it was stated that when this program was implemented, that USCIS, which is the program that processes your application, they will not be able to share any of your information with anybody else, like with ICE, and so pretty much your information will be safe. So there was that promise, and if they were not to follow these protocols, then you can actually you can sue the government because they essentially lied to you when they told you that your information was safe. So I guess for right now, we're definitely asking for folks to consult with a lawyer before actually applying, because because we kind of want to be careful and want to make sure that people are aware of what the risk could potentially be. But essentially, the program is back in place, and even when I applied back in 2012, I kind of was aware of these fears that that could potentially happen. But I made the conscious decision to apply, and it's not something that I regret. And so I think a lot of it depends on the person, but we definitely want to recommend that whoever is thinking of applying, that they first consult with a local community organization or with a lawyer, so that way they able to follow the steps, and then they have somebody to back them up legally.
And now that you've won the case, or in a sense you've won the case, you've won the decision. What do you, besides encouraging people to enroll and advising them on that process, are there any other steps that Make the Road is involved with, as far as do you basically just wait and see what the administration is going to throw at you, or are there other things you're doing to seize the moment and prevent this reversal?
Yeah, I guess right now what you try to push is for something to be that is permanent. Right now, there's currently a bill in Congress called the Dream and Promise Act, which will basically have some sort of relief for immigrant youth like myself, but then it will also have a pathway to citizenship after 5 or 10 years, depending on how long you've lived here. So I think right now what's important is that Congress, at the national level, your representatives, your senators, they're able to actually vote for this legislation, so that way, we avoid this issue of having a president who can just get rid of this program, because it is a program. It's not really a law or a piece of legislation. So essentially what you want is to be able to pass some sort of immigration bill that will provide permanent relief for this undocumented immigrants who have benefited from DACA, or who could potentially benefit from DACA. So that's kind of what we do. At the national level, I guess right now, a lot of our work is often kind of about okay, we fought for something and then we just move forward into the next thing. But with Trump, it's different, because there was a lot of these policies that we had already advocated for that we just kind of had to defend. For example, DACA, right? So he decided to take DACA, and instead of us moving on to fighting for protections for our parents, we had to focus on fighting to defend DACA. And so it's kind of and so now we defended DACA, so now we move on to the next thing, which is fighting for a bill that is more permanent, and that is called right now the HR 6, which is the Dream and Promise Act, which will essentially, if we're to it passed in the House of Representatives, but it's not passed in the Senate. So, but if we were able to pass and get voted, it will essentially become law, and then we will be able to have some sort of more permanent relief. Then Trump, also when he was trying to add the citizenship question to our census, we also took him to court. We also took him to the Supreme Court, and we were also able to win. So now currently, for folks who are trying to fill out the census, it does not include a citizenship question, and it's pretty safe to do so. So these are many things that we're just kind of constantly having to fight for to defend currently. But hopefully that, we have a new president next year, and so who is more on our side, so that way we can actually be able to advance more policies that are to stand up for immigrant communities. So that's
and hopefully we can take the Senate as well, or the Senate can be taken, because again, that makes it tough to make things happen. We're actually at the last quarter mark, and which is typically, I'm checking my phone to see if Dr. Riccio, who is manning the Twitch stream, is getting any kind of questions as far as folks who are watching. But if I don't see any coming in, I'm going to keep going. So I usually use this, besides questions, this is like, talk about future plans. And you've talked a lot about, we've asked about the DACA future plan or the Make the Roads future plans. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else you would share, initiatives that you're involved with Make the Road, but you can also talk a little bit about, Ricardo's future. If, like, let's say in November, uh, Trump loses and somebody else comes in and now takes over, and you've got somebody on your side. Do you then start thinking about Baruch again? What future plans do you have? Right now, you thinking?
I think for now, it's just I definitely am just trying to like get through this president and then think about like what's my next move. But currently, I really like the work that I do at Make the Road, at Make the Road New York. So we fight for, a lot of issues, not just like immigration. One of our campaigns right now is to be able to defund the NYPD and be able to get police out of schools. I personally, when I was young, I went to a school that had metal detectors, and metal detectors don't often make students feel safe. If anything, they actually make you feel like you're a criminal, like So I think part of our work right now is to be able to defund or get some funding out of the NYPD, and then that also includes getting police out of our schools, and so that we actually allocating those resources to programs that are more for like younger children, or like for like youth programs, like for mental health services, like services that actually make our students and like young people safe, rather than like policing them all the time. And especially right now, as we're seeing like in the wake of all of the, the protests that are happening around, like, against police brutality, I think right now there's a potential for us to be able to win on some of these policing reforms that we're trying to advance. We're also advocating for trans issues. So like particularly like in Queens, in Jackson Heights, there's like a big trans community. And currently there's a bill that we're trying to repeal called the Repeal the Walking While Trans ban, where currently like trans women could potentially just get stopped by police just for wearing like, let's say, sexy clothes, where police will kind of refer to, and then they will kind of like basically label them as like sex workers. But also it's kind of like about like actually also defending like sex workers. So we work on multiple campaigns, like from environmental jobs, housing. So right now we're also trying to get to cancel rent, because we know that particularly like immigrant communities, they were left out of like any sort of like stimulus relief. And we even know that like $1,200,000 is actually like not enough money to survive for the past 3 months that like, people have been quarantined. So, many particular immigrant communities, there's like delivery workers, undocumented immigrants, like they were excluded of any sort of relief. And so many of them have to rely on like community support from like food pantries. So we're also like trying to advocate for like a recovery for all. And that means like creating an excluded workers fund. And a way to be able to do that is by making their super ultra wealthy rich people, like the billionaires that live in New York City, or like New York State, to pay their fair share, so that we're actually able to invest in like immigrant communities who have been left out of the stimulus. So we're doing that, and cancel rent. So there's like many campaigns that we're working on. So I think essentially my goal is to kind of be able to, to make sure that like everyone has like find some sort of liberation. Like for me, is being able to have some sort of like immigration status, but for many others, that means other things. But essentially for us, what we're trying to fight is for respect and dignity for each and every single person who lives in this country. And so those are my plans. I love my job at Make the Road New York. I definitely see myself being here for the long run, or we'll see. But essentially, I do want to be able to go back to school, once things have slowed down and are not like super crazy, and then just be able to finish my bachelor's from Berlin.
By the way, there was no question on the Twitch stream, but there was a purple heart that came from the LaGuardia Photo Lab. I don't know who exactly sent that, who's watching the show now. I'm guessing it's Lydia, our friend.
Yeah,
it's Lydia Khan.
I think she likes purple.
I wonder if
it's because of Twitch. Or I don't know if it's because Twitch is purple, but yeah.
Well, that also a Purple Heart is, one of the medals that you get as a soldier in military service in the U.S. To get it, I think you have to be wounded at least 2 or 3 times in battle, which is why it's such an important medal. And, you know, I mean, you've certainly been fighting a fight. And I don't know about you were wounded by those early remarks, but if anything, it triggered you into this very passionate work. Here, I'm talking now as a photo professor, though you were never actually in any of my classes, or you're never in my beginning photo, which is the one class I always teach. Are you still taking pictures?
Yeah. So part of my work at Make the Road New York is that, so I run all of our social media channels, and that includes like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And I'm not gonna lie, like I'm very picky about the content that I post, and that means like being, having really high quality photography. Like I really love like high quality photos, like that have some sort of well thought out process. We actually have a lot of volunteers at Make the Road New York, and then there's a couple who are who have either graduated or took a class at LaGuardia Community College that I know, and so that has been really nice. But yes, like I still do photography. Back then, I guess my camera, my go-to camera was a 5D Mark II. It was a Canon, and then I'm currently shooting with a Lumix, the HD5, I believe, right? So that's kind of sort of what I'm currently like shooting with, and yeah. So I definitely take a lot of pictures, which is really nice to be able to do this. Although right now we haven't really had a lot of actions that are on site. We've been able to have a few, but I definitely always like. I like being able to shoot, and like I like being able to take pictures. And part of my work at Make the Road, it allows me to be able to do that and sort of be able to use, I guess, like my creative skills, and that includes photo and video to be able to kind of advance our campaign. So I think that's why I'm really happy. Like I love taking pictures. I have infinite amount of photos actually.
In the digital age, yes, everybody takes a lot of pictures now.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of near the end of the show, so I wanted to give you a little time. Any last remarks or people you want to thank, or maybe some suggestions you want to make to our audience about joining the fight and being supportive of Make the Road?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have multiple campaigns. I guess right now, like as the digital organizer, one of the easiest ways to connect to us is either visiting our website. So it's like maketheroadnewyorkny.org, or following us on social media. So we're like on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and that will be at Make the Road NY, at Make the Road NY. And that way you're able to receive all of the updates. Donating is also helpful. We're currently running multiple like food pantries, in Jackson Heights, Queens, here in Bushwick, Brooklyn, where we help communities who are most in need of like food pantry, who were not able to receive like support from the government. So yeah, if you want to plug in, just feel free to check out our website, check out our social media. Obviously right now, because we're still, many of us are working from home, we're not able to kind of, do mobilizations or take the streets in a way that seems safe for us or for our members. At Make the Road New York, we lost many members due to COVID. And so I think the last thing that we want to do is, expose many of our membership to take the streets and put themselves at risk. So for us, it's super important that they stay safe. And then in terms of DACA, so I guess today, one of the things that I was working on was having this landing page on our website that had DACA resources on what this DACA outcome means. So if you go on nydaca.org, you're able to receive all the frequently asked questions that people would normally have on what this decision means. What does this mean for new folks that are trying to apply? How do you get in touch with the lawyer? So you can actually, if you live in the New York City area, you can call 311, and then they will be able to connect you with a New York City lawyer that is free. And if you're outside of New York, then there's a number that you can find there. So if you go on nydaca.org, then you're able to find resources. And part of the communications team, we make sure that our website has as many good, useful know your rights trainings, or know your rights as an immigrant, know your rights as a tenant. And then just a lot of resources that that can be helpful for our community. So I think that's one thing that I want to encourage folks to do is check out our website. We have many resources that you can just share with your community, with your family on social media.
And since I guess it's so pressing, it is tomorrow. Do you want to say anything about voting and get out the vote?
Yeah. So tomorrow is a primary election. Essentially, you get to choose who you're going to vote for, who's going to represent you, whether you're Democrat or Republican, in the November elections. So you have an opportunity to vote tomorrow. We had early voting, which kind of ended yesterday, Sunday. So if you wanted to vote early, you could have done that starting since last Saturday. There was a whole week where you could have early voted. If you wanted to submit if you still don't feel comfortable about voting from like going outside and voting at your polling site. You can, if you requested an absentee ballot, or if you received an absentee ballot, many folks didn't, some folks did, you're able to submit it until tomorrow. Tomorrow's the deadline to submit your absentee ballot. Or tomorrow you can just go to your regular polling site and then be able to vote in person. But primary elections are like super important. It's essentially how you pick who is gonna like represent you in the long run. So it AOC, who currently represents Queens and the Bronx, she had like a big win in the primary, and then essentially that's how she was able to take out the incumbent at the time. So primary elections are super important because you get to pick like new insurgent candidates who want to challenge those who have not done the work to represent us for many years. So yeah, I definitely can't stress enough how important it is to vote. Being undocumented, I personally cannot vote, so that's why for me it's super important to make sure that other folks are able to know that this is like a huge privilege that you have and that you're able to use to make transformative change in your community. So I hope people go out and vote. Did you vote already, Hugo? I guess that's my question.
Well, I don't know, because we haven't really talked a lot for a while, but I'm not in New York anymore. I had to move to Connecticut because I couldn't afford to live in the 5 boroughs. At least not in the home that my wife, my wife had a dream of a detached place, and everywhere we looked, we didn't. I don't know if we ever even found what she wanted, but I don't think I could have afforded it. And so now I live far away, and this is all kind of worked out for me in some sense. I mean, obviously when I teach, I'm in the city. I stay in the city during the week. It's not like the days when I was in the building 7 days a week, so that's changed. But so yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to vote here in Connecticut. I think I can walk into my city hall, my town hall, whatever, and what was just how we voted the last time. Because we weren't home on Tuesday. I teach class, so that's what I mean. So we're still trying to figure that out. But yeah, in my family, my mother had always made it a big deal about voting. She talked about voting, even in the years of the Batista regime in Cuba, when Fidel tried to talk people out of voting, she voted. So yeah, voting's a big deal in my family. But I just want to say, I just want to thank you, and I'm just so grateful that you came on this show, and just say, I mean, like I said, you weren't one of my students, so I can't take any pride in how you turned out. But I think that the institution LaGuardia should be very happy that we had the opportunity to be a part of your life. And you never stop impressing me, Ricardo. I just want to thank you for being on our show. All right.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And I think ever since I graduated, like, we've gotten a lot of support from LaGuardia. We've been invited. Like, I've spoken a couple of times at LaGuardia since I graduated. I've always received the support. So I think that always kind of has really like meant a lot. Just like as a creative artist, but also like as an undocumented immigrant, because like LaGuardia, it is a super diverse school, and not only like in terms of like nationalities, but also that you have folks who are undocumented, folks who are documented, but LaGuardia has always been like super supportive for all of their students, and that's something that I haven't really seen that often. Yeah. Maybe I see that at Baruch, and that's why I didn't statement. But I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. No, Baruch was also pretty great, but LaGuardia has always been super. I really appreciate that.
Yes, and that's our charge. So if you've been watching the show, What's Going On? I've been your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR, and my guest today was Ricardo Aca, who is the Senior Digital Organizer at Make the Road, a LaGuardia alum. And he was talking to us a little bit about how he participated in this landmark DACA case that was just decided by the United States Supreme Court in favor of the DACA recipients. And hopefully we can keep that program alive long enough to get somebody in the White House who will continue to support it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And Mr. Pope, can you take us out the way we came in? Thanks.